many people on camera today? Oh, there we go. I see them coming up. Nice to see you. Happy Friday. Hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. It was a nice weekend, kind of mellow for me. Hey, Larry, haven't seen Larry in a while. Larry must be doing a Santa Claus gig. You got a nice beard, guy. I like it. I'll see you at the mall, Larry. So yeah, good to see everyone. I hope you're getting ready for the holidays coming up as well. Going to be busy couple weeks, right? This mulch thing kind of caught us by surprise a little bit. It's an amendment. It's a proposed amendment. Has not been adopted yet, but it's an amendment to the fire code. So it's the statewide fire code adopted by the state of New Jersey. It has not become effective yet. So we'll talk about that more today. I want to thank Matt Earl, who's an attorney from Hackensack, who is on the CAI Legislative Action Committee, and he's the chair of the committee. And he and I were talking about this after a seminar over at New Jersey ICL. And for those of you who don't know, CAI New Jersey has an excellent Legislative Action Committee. A Legislative Action Committee monitors pending legislation in the legislature and pending regulations, and also takes positions on them if necessary, right? There are times that they will meet with legislators and try to shape legislation, advocate for issues with respect to homeowners associations, or oppose issues that have been proposed that Legislative Action Committee and the Community Associations Institute feel will harm community associations. So the Legislative Action Committee does a great job. It is a lot of work for those of you who have been on the Legislative Action Committee. I have, and it's a lot of work. It's actually a real working committee where they divide up the pending legislation and have the members evaluate the various proposals and recommend positions on them, for, against, neutral, etc., and get background. So thank you so much to Matt Earl for taking the time to speak to me about this. Very helpful. And let's see, as a footnote, the 2024 Fran McGovern, First Friday with Fran, Dog of the Day calendars are available, right? So they're available, they're out, the Dog of the Day calendars. For those of you who sent your addresses in last year, we will send you a calendar automatically. For those of you who have not sent in for the Dog of the Day calendar, please send your email over to Crystal with your address, and we will send you in the mail, regular mail, a Dog of the Day calendar for 2024. Today's Dog of the Day, Crystal, are you out there with me? Today's Dog of the Day is Riley, who is owned by Linda Patterson of Associate. There's Riley. Riley's looking good. Looks like a young German Shepherd. Beautiful dog. Looks young. Looks happy. Nice to see you, Riley. Thanks so much, Linda, for sending Riley's picture in. And let's see, where do we go on to? That's the Dog of the Day. Now let's just talk about the regulation itself. We talked about the calendars. Let's talk about the regulation itself. So those of you who have the agenda, you can see, let's see here. I'll put it up if I can here. So there's the agenda itself. Let's see, stop share. You can see the agenda right there, Mike.
Yep.
Yeah, so the agenda itself. So this is an amendment, a proposed amendment to the administrative code as to landscaping materials. And when we're talking about the administrative code, and they are proposing a new section, which is 305.6. As to landscaping materials, and the proposed section, and I usually don't do this, but I'd like to read it today. It says the use of combustible landscaping materials such as wood-based mulch products is prohibited in any of the following conditions within 18 inches of any building or structures, right? So that's our planting beds. That's our planting beds out there in the community association world, and virtually every association I've ever worked with has had the mulch bed up against the foundation, right up against the foundation. So what this reg, at least the proposed reg as I see it, is essentially saying that you're going to, once this passes and within a year, because they're going to give you, as it's proposed right now, 12 months from the time this is adopted to bring your communities or your homes within the regulation, to move the mulch bed 18 inches back away from any combustible materials, right? So there are exceptions to that, although the exceptions, for those of you who are looking at the agenda there, are very poorly written, very poorly written. The exceptions are live plant materials such as shrubs, flowers, and trees, provided that they are not located within 18 inches of the building or structure or beneath a combustible overhang. Well, to me, that means nothing because it doesn't really give you any exemption. They're still requiring it to be 18 inches back. The second exemption is non-combustible building or structure exteriors that have no combustible components or trim with less than 3 feet clearance from grade. So when we're talking about that, that's where you see buildings. You'll see this sometimes in townhome communities where the concrete before the siding stops, before the siding starts, goes up 3 feet, right? So there's the mulch bed that goes up to the foundation, but the combustible material does not start until 3 feet above, right, where you see the parging and your block foundation, right? So there's an exception there, but I know very, very, very few associations that have that kind of foundation reveal, right? They would call that the reveal before the siding itself starts. So I don't see that exemption being applicable much at all. And then the third exception is fire-resistant mulch. Fire-resistant mulch. I don't know of fire-resistant mulch. I've never heard of fire-resistant mulch. I assume it's out there, or perhaps the legislature would not have referred to it. I just am not familiar with it. So I don't know anybody who has fire-resistant mulch at the moment. If any of you do, feel free to put it in the chat. I'm not aware of it. So why is this such a big issue for our communities? It's, so the first rumors, if you will, when I first heard about this proposed regulation was, oh, well, it's going to exempt single family homes. It's going to exempt certain associations. Things will be grandfathered in, et cetera, et cetera. I don't, and I spoke to Matt about this, I don't see any carve out or exemption for single family homes, for associations, for clubhouses, or anything that would really apply to our constituency right now. I don't see it. Now, the fire code is a very, hey, Lara, the fire code is a very large code. So there may be instances in the code itself, for example, in the introduction to the code. And by the way, Larry's a fireman. Into the introduction to the code that may give us a carve out. Like, for example, in the definitional sections, I just haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen the detail on the code and the amendments that would give us any exemption, and neither has Matt from LAC. So when we're looking at this, as we go on to the second section in the agenda, NJAC 5:70-3.2, which would include new section 305.7 under the existing materials, it says all occupancy subject to this code shall remove all combustible landscape materials that are located within 18 inches of the foundation of any building or structure, or in the area of any designated smoking area. This product may be replaced with non-combustible materials such as stone or sand. Okay. As all of you know, and I don't know many associations that are not uniform in this approach, many associations say, listen, this is what you're going to have as your planting bed. It's going to be mulch, it's going to be red, or it's going to be brown, or it's going to be black. And in addition to that, you may specify a certain type of stone, how big the stone, river rock, etc. It's specified, and uniformity is usually specified within those requirements. So I've heard of a couple of associations right now that are involved in disputes regarding people who have, without authorization, installed stone planting beds, right? Installed stone planting beds when the association specifies mulch planting beds throughout. And one of the questions that arises is, Fran, should we pursue these people who put in stone planting beds without authorization, when in fact, if this reg goes into effect, we're going to have to pull planting beds back 18 inches anyway and put stone or sand or some other non-combustible material in there? My answer is, I don't know, but why fight that issue right now? You might just want to hold that issue in abeyance for the moment and see where this reg shakes out. So the reg itself was published back in June of this year, but and Matt doesn't know this either, when it will actually be adopted such that the 12-month period for implementation will begin. The official commentary period for the regulation has closed, but that doesn't mean that people in homeowners association can't reach out to the DCA and express any opinions you may have to the DCA. The one thing in expressing and taking positions on life, health, safety issues is many people are reluctant to say, we don't want this regulation, right? Because God forbid you have a mulch fire, it winds up setting the building on fire and people lose their lives. So it's a tough issue. I will say, and I will show you one thing that we did have here. I'll share a screen again. So unlike New Jersey, this is a copy of the amended Massachusetts fire code with respect to mulch. So what the Massachusetts amended fire code says, mulch shall not be newly applied within 18 inches of any combustible portion of any building. And they give you this nice little sketch drawing there, a little line drawing, so they see the mulch there. It ends, right? It ends, and then you have an 18-inch portion there with non-combustible mulch, right? So there's nothing there. The important thing and the difference, right, is if you read what's below the sketch in the Massachusetts code, is it says this section shall not apply to any building regardless of the existence of fire separations containing 6 dwelling units or less. So the Massachusetts reg exempts buildings of 6 units or less. I don't know how that came to pass. There, like I said, there were rumors when I first heard about this that there were going to be exemptions for single-family homes, but I did not see that in the reg at all, and I have not seen that yet. So stop share there. So for today's purposes, I think all of us are going to have to pay close attention to their mulch beds, to what their mulching may look like for next year, right? So if this reg is going to be in effect, you want to talk to your landscapers, and you don't want to sign a contract this January for installing $300,000 worth of mulch next summer, right? You don't want to do that. So a lot of associations mulch every 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year, what have you. But as you know, mulch is very expensive to install, very expensive to buy, especially of a large association. Be careful of getting into a mulch contract now that's going to apply, and this reg may come into being at the same time, and you may wind up be kicking yourself for getting into a mulch contract. So if any of you are thinking about doing mulching in the coming spring, make sure you check on this reg first. Make sure you find out if it has passed, if it is effective, and if it has become effective and you still want to maintain wood mulch, make sure you work with your landscaper to install it in a way that there is at least 18 inches of non-combustible material between the combustible surface and the edge of the mulch. Okay. So this is going to be really short today. I know we do have some questions. It's just a kind of a very hot issue. I can tell you, when I was at my old law firm, we had a pretty good sized mulch fire outside the back entrance to the firm. The good news there was it was a stucco sided building, and it just burned along and did not catch the building on fire, just burned all the plantings. The other remarkable thing, although mulch fires apparently do start on their own, it is remarkable how many times mulch fires start in areas where people have been smoking outside buildings, right? So you do have to be cautious about that, right? If people in your community are smoking in areas, you certainly don't want them smoking and congregating smoking in areas where there are combustible substances, right? So like mulch, because as mulch dries out, right, it becomes combustible. And if there is a fire source, even if it's not spontaneous combustion, people are throwing cigarette butts into the mulch pile, you're going to have a problem. And that's why the regulation itself references not just the buildings, but also smoking enclosures. So like for my office building here, the building itself is brick, but we have a smoking enclosure outside the building where people do smoke every day. And this applies to smoking enclosures too, if you have smoking enclosures in your community, even if it's not part of your actual building, residential building. So that being said, do you want to, we'll jump into some chat questions. Maybe you guys have some more answers than I have. It's just it's a hot topic, not to make a pun out of this. What is CAI's position there? That's a good question, Mike. So when I talked to Matt Earl, he did not tell me what CAI's position has been on this so far. So for those of you who are interested in this topic, I will reach out and try to find out if CAI New Jersey has taken a position on this. As I said, from a life health safety standpoint, it's very difficult to advocate against life health safety regs, right? Very difficult. So I don't know if CAI has taken a position on this at all, but I will reach out, and if I do find out that they have, I will let you know. Ray has a link here. I will try and pull it up, but we're going to move forward first. Rich Lindeman, who's an attorney with our office, says shredded wood chips or medium pine bark are moderately fire resistant. Thanks, Rich. I don't know if that's going to help us, though. I would suggest, thanks, Rich, though, for real. I would suggest being very careful before you spend money on shredded wood chips or medium pine bark, because I think there's probably a good chance that the DCA may look at that as combustible as well. Does this apply to new mulch or existing, Valerie? Do we have to remove old mulch? So the way I see the reg written right now, unless it changes between now and adoption, is it appears to me that you're going to have to scrape back the mulch 18 inches from the combustible surface, right? That's what it looks like the way it's written.
Hey, Fran, somebody asks if it includes private residential homes, buildings.
So again, I don't see any exemption. So my real answer is I don't know, but the way it's written now, there's no exemption for single family private residential buildings. I don't see it. Like I said, that may be, the fire code is so kind of complex and convoluted in certain ways. So just so you know, when the fire code is adopted, it's an international, more or less template fire code. And then each state then makes its additions, subtractions, and changes to the fire code. And so it becomes very difficult to clearly interpret it. So as to single family homes, just on its face, it applies to single family homes. If I find something that takes it outside the single family home realm, I'll let you know. I haven't seen anything yet, but it would, if it was going to, that type of exemption would come out of a definitional section, and I haven't seen it yet. So 18 inches is half the area from the foundation to the walkway. So, you know, Al is saying, hey, that seems like a lot. And I agree with you, Al. It's gonna be a real challenge for many associations. And the problem is, I think a fire safety person would probably say, okay, well then just, if you think that will look odd, then just replace it with stone. Replace it with river rock or replace it with stone. But as you know, that's extraordinarily expensive to do. What is the impact on tot lot regulations? I have not seen anything on tot lot regulations. I think, and I'd have to look at the reg again in context with that. Many tot lots don't have combustible structures, but many do, especially the old school ones that have the 4x4 structures on the post. So I don't know if it would apply to tot lots or not. I haven't thought about it in that context. I think it really applies to occupancies, right? Actual occupancies rather than something like a tot lot. So if you want me to just take a guess, I'll say that this was not meant to address things like tot lots. It more or less it's aimed at occupancies. Let's see. This seems to read that trees, shrubs, and flowers within would have to be removed. So I agree with you, Anna. It does seem like it applies to trees and other plantings as well. Or, and I've seen some of this with arborvitaes, where people wind up cutting the arborvitae in half to give you spacing from the building. The unfortunate thing with that is oftentimes it kills the plant, kills the tree, in addition to looking crazy, right? So I hear you, Anna. The other thing that, speaking of arborvitaes, is, everyone thinks these arborvitaes get this 4 foot above the ground disease where all the branches are gone. And then there's like everyone knows, right, that the deer are just feasting on your arborvitaes. It's like deer cotton candy. They love that stuff. When I was a kid, I could never understand why all the plants were like dying on the bottom, but I didn't realize that the deer were feasting at night. So there are some arborvitaes that are deer resistant. But anyway, yeah, to me, it looks like the way it's written right now is even plant and shrubbery material would have to be taken 18 inches away from combustible areas. The links are from Nevada study, interesting things. Oh, okay. Thanks, Ray. So what Ray's saying is the links he put up here in the top of the comment is referencing studies on this type of issue from Nevada. Let's see.
Fran, Jim
Go ahead,
asks,
Mike.
is the vinyl siding used in New Jersey considered to be combustible? It ignites at a higher temperature than wood?
So I would say so. I mean, again, I'm not a fire expert. I know we have some firemen on the call, but I would say so. I mean, I've seen it melt like crazy. Vinyl. I've seen it melt like crazy. I mean, it almost looks like a candle. You see people even without an open flame, right? You see people have their propane grills and they get them too close to the vinyl siding, and you see the vinyl siding all melt like down the wall, which is very scary. Which again, you shouldn't have those propane tanks or propane grills near a combustible surface either. Have also Ed says, hey, I've also seen mulch ignited by landscape lighting after being applied covering a fixture. Oh, landscape lighting, yes. So there was a note regarding that in the reg itself in one of the notes. So what Ed is mentioning is a lot of people put in those, they look very nice at night, those little spot pot lights that are in the planting bed. And at times, especially if they get covered over by the dry mulch, Ed is right that they can lead to a fire as well. I mean, they look great at night when they're lighting up the side of the building, but you do have to be careful. Ed makes a very good point that you should make sure that your landscaper has the lighting set up in such a way that they don't set the mulch on fire. Can you just leave dirt there? Yes, Valerie, I think you can just leave dirt there. And it's almost like the reg suggests that. In addition to stone, etc. But I mean, how many associations have stone cold dirt up to their foundations? It's just, it's balancing cost with curb appeal, right? It's cost and curb appeal, and most associations that we work with are very concerned, rightfully so, about curb appeal, and stone cold dirt usually doesn't look so awesome in terms of curb appeal. The only thing you could say perhaps is, well, Fran, that's nice, but we're worried about curb appeal. So maybe what we would do is take the mulch away from the planes on the side of the building and the rear of the building that don't front out, and just reconfigure the mulch on the front of the building that faces the street, right? So that's a way you could control cost. So that is a good suggestion.
And Fran, also another unintended consequence of removing the mulch and just leaving dirt would probably be a lot of weeds.
That's right. So you see weeds and right, you see weeds. We see other things too, Mike, and you and I have had cases like this where, so with the mulch bed, it does a couple things. Number one, it suppresses weeds. It gives you some curb appeal. It also keeps your mowers, your deck mowers, off of sometimes critical areas, such as gas meter pipelines, right? Not going right up against the foundation. And what we see cut a lot, we don't see gas lines cut usually, but we see the Freon lines for AC compressors outside, right? Because if you have a mulch bed there, it's going to keep the deck mowers and the weed whackers and all that other crazy stuff away from the Freon lines. But if you don't have a buffer there with something like mulch, the landscapers tend to just rock out and take out your Freon line, which is a problem. And then what happens is I get the phone call, the manager gets the phone call, hey, your landscaper hit our Freon line, and now we want to sue the association, sue the landscaper to fix our HVAC unit, right? So Mike's right. Not only is it a buffer with weeds, it's a buffer from the landscapers themselves. Rich says, hey, we'll need real guidance on a mulch alternative, as there are several products that hold themselves out as fire resistant. Client should be careful that landscaper doesn't attempt to convince them. or an alternative product that's compliant before they have real guidance. I agree, Rich. We have to, especially since this stuff is so expensive, we got to figure out, is it really fire resistant? Because again, you don't want to spend for new mulch and then have the DCA come in and inspector come in and say, no, it's got to go out. Al says, I ripped the stone out years ago for the mulch, which breaks down and helps the soil. I hear you, Al. I hear you. There's a lot of good reasons for mulch. Again, the study that that was sent over may be something worth looking at. And like I said, I'm really not familiar with the scope of the fire risk. The mulch fires I've seen seem to have been related, unfortunately, to cigarettes, but that's a risk as well. Mike says, what is the consideration for plant material as far as how far away from combustible material it needs to be? Hedges 30 inches wide. So it looks, Mike, like the proposed reg is still going to require the same spacing, right? It's going to require 18 inches. So I know that's odd, even because it even references living material, living plant material, but it seems to be written that it's going to require 18 inches. It says once melted, vinyl can ignite. Yeah, I hear you. Sure. Wayne, I've heard that it would not apply if your buildings are hardy board siding. Hardy siding states that it is not combustible Class A fire rate. So yeah, I have hardy board on my shed, and it's almost like a cement board type thing. But again, which is great, but check before you're buying stuff that it's compliant and it truly is non-combustible. It seems like it would be, right? Because it's a cement type board, but check before you buy stuff, because we don't, again, want to make sure everyone's aware of this and you don't go out and buy materials thinking it's non-combustible in the DCA's mind, and then you wind up with something you have to replace. Besides aesthetics, mulch is used to keep moisture in the soil for the benefit of shrubs and trees, root systems. If replaced with riverstone or the like, you lose the moist benefit, right? More unintended consequences from Trenton, do-gooder, unfounded mandates. Yeah, Jim. So as you know, it's the world today, right? I don't know if these things were considered, but for those of you who remember, whose administration was Christine Todd Whitman's administration there was a terrible drought in New Jersey, and I felt like every association that I work with lost all their plant materials because during that time, the administration was not allowing associations to water, right? So again, I'm not an arborist, but it's true that mulch material does help the plant life retain moisture, et cetera, and help growth. So especially when you're in a time of not having a lot of rain. Ray's sending more stuff over on landscaping plants, et cetera. Thanks, Ray. So Ray has materials that he's linking out there. If you want to take a look, check it out. They're in the chat. And if we're able to, we'll send them out blast. So Crystal, if you could send out those links, if people want to review the materials from Middlesex Fire Bureau, Toms River Fire Bureau, et cetera. So yeah, and he's referencing mulch fires in a hotel and a home recently, and there are various pictures that Ray has sent over, right? So let's see if I can show you this. That's a pretty nasty picture right there. You guys see that? I don't know if I can pull it over to my other screen. Let's see. All right. Pretty nasty picture sent over by Ray, right? Everyone can see that picture. So that's your vinyl siding, melting like a candle, right? Thank God it looks like it did not wind up taking down the whole building, but even you can see damage here, and as you know, for those of you who have seen fires, unfortunately, even a structure like this could have easily killed somebody because people die oftentimes from smoke inhalation rather than the structure burning down, right? That's the problem. So, okay. Thanks, Race, for sending them over. We'll be posting these links for future reference. Yeah, Al, what we'll do is I'll have Crystal send out the links and the pictures that Ray and others have sent over so that people have them. We are discussing the 18 inches on the ground. Was there any discussion in the regs alluding to siding? We could continue, oh, sorry, we could continue with the roofs between units and other items worth discussing in regards to fire prevention. I'm wondering how far we go with these issues. You know, Lori, I think right now it is all we're dealing with is the ground, for sure. As you know, and people have mentioned on here, there are unintended consequences with any regulation. And for those of us who are old enough, you'll remember that there was a certain type of FRT plywood required in the roofs back in the day in the 80s. And it wound up falling apart and collapsing, and wound up those associations that were built in the late 80s and early 90s had to replace all their roof sheathing, or at least the roof sheathing within 5 feet of the firewall. So I imagine there are going to be new issues with new unintended consequences. It's going to be interesting to see whether there are any changes to this proposed regulation before it takes effect. And the important thing to keep in mind is you do have a 12-month window from the time it does take effect. They announce its effective date to implement any changes required. And we also obviously don't know how stringent they will be in terms of enforcement, because if this actually does apply to all types of occupancies, you can imagine this would affect probably, you know, half, 2/3 of the communities out there, if not more, right? So that's just from an inspection standpoint, that's a huge thing. And that's why when I was talking to somebody about it last week, it sounds like the full employment for landscapers bill, right? Imagine how much landscape labor you're going to have if all of this stuff has to be removed 18 inches away from the combustible foundation. So that's, I just want to put it on everyone's radar, especially now before things start, people start signing contracts for mulch in the spring. I don't want you kicking yourself saying, I just signed a contract to spend a couple $100,000, and now I got to modify my whole approach to the mulch situation. All right, so that's it for today. I know that was short. I hope I gave you something to think about. I know mulch is not super riveting. It's not a super sexy topic, but I want to make sure you get on top of it before it hits you in the spring. So that being said, I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, a Happy Hanukkah, and any other holiday you celebrate or do not celebrate between now and when I see you in the new year. So have a Happy New Year, everyone. It's great seeing you, and I really, really appreciate you attending every month. Have a great one.